All right, Alexander, let's answer the questions from the live stream with Robert Barnes from Valley S. Thank you very much, Valley S, for that super chat. VUF says, I occasionally see Russians ask in Telegram if they can buy Duran merch. Am I right when I reply, I expect so? Yes, absolutely, they can buy Duran merch. Commando Crossfire says, what's good an honest soldier if he can be ordered to behave like a terrorist?
Wow, good question. Let me repeat again what I've said on several occasions. There's the Nuremberg Principle, which is part of international law, which says that a soldier commits a war crime himself if he carries out criminal orders.
Cactus Ray, thank you for that super sticker. Brian, thank you for that super chat. Chris Winnan says, this is obviously the most important podcast on Earth right now. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Sharon Kidney 2, thank you for that super sticker. Tyler Durden, thank you for that super chat. Goker says, why Russia isn't sending their investigation teams there? EEZs are international waters. Surveillance and intelligence activities within EEZs are legal. Even military exercises are. They cannot be excluded or barred.
I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that. I don't have an answer to that question. Maybe they need to form a team to go there. Maybe it's the problems with the the outflow of gas, which is making the water turbulent. I can't answer that.
Maybe it's not in the EEZs.
Maybe it's not in the EEZs.
Elza says, Elza says Schultz was next to Biden talking about Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
During that video.
Yeah.
Lana, thank you for that super sticker. Bauke says the West is a visual society. Russia is a literate society. The RF ministries need to swiftly and dramatically step up their visual, informational, and PR departments in short footage of dramatic and historic events.
I agree, but this has been something we've been talking about the Russians, that their media operations leave a lot to be desired for a long time. Foreign Ministry, in my opinion, is one of the better agencies in the Russian government in publishing information, actually.
Adriatic Heart says, have a dinner in 15 minutes, but as a Danish citizen, I just want to say DK has no balls in this case and will do as told and cover this pipeline sabotage up.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Bucklebrush Jones says, the USS Liberty sinking by Israel was bigger.
Well, I don't think it was bigger because Israel and the United States were friends, and there was never really a chance that the US would act against Israel, to be straightforward about this. This is Germany. This is a deliberate attack on German infrastructure intended to immiserate Germany. And that's a very terrible thing.
Jerry says, can you imagine the outcry if Trump had blown it up? Ecological disaster.
Off the scale. You would never even conceive of doing a thing like that, in my opinion.
Evans, Amondi, thank you for that super sticker. Lady Freddie, thank you for that super sticker. Alan Shepard says the attack on Germany, but at the same time secured Poland with gas from the Baltic.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Yeah.
Commander Crossfire says every war is the result of a difference of opinion. Maybe the biggest questions can only be answered by the greatest of conflicts.
Ooh. Difficult question to answer. I don't think that there are differences of opinion here. I think there are fundamental differences in outlook and in civilization, to be honest. And I think that's the problem. Because one won't accept the legitimacy of the other.
Marud Hamuda, thank you for that super chat. Zachary says, I feel like it's plan B. Plan A, destroy Russia through Ukraine. If plan A doesn't work, make Europe dependent on the U.S. energy. The U.S. either wins big or wins small, but they need to win. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think that explains pretty well the thinking here. I still think that destroying the vital energy infrastructure of your key European ally is an act of nihilism. That's all I'm going to say about that, because, that to me, that seems straight obvious.
John Flanders says the Leninist definition of inter-imperialist conflict, no honor among thieves.
Mm-hmm.
Matless X says, why is the UK not being seriously considered? They scuttled the peace deal in April. They possibly orchestrated the attack on the nuke plant when the investigators were coming, and they have Liz Truss.
Oh, I don't think anybody's excluding the British. And, as Robert said, they are very sold on, the James Bond type thing. I can just imagine that, the British were involved in some ways. I'm quite happy to believe that they were involved. What I don't believe is that they would have done this without consulting the US first. I mean, knowing how Britain works, it is inconceivable that they would have done this on their own.
Kaig C says, make sure you tell Dad we're all watching at Rumble and chatting on Rumble.
Yeah.
Zariel says, check the book Body of Secrets by James Bamford to see what's happening here. One-on-one, 20 years old and still 100% up to date.
Gosh. Wow.
Pasha says, Robert and the Alexes, which of you are going to add dumb nuts to your merchandise line first? I'll buy each.
Oh,
We'll add that. We'll add that to the shirts. Raphael says, America has the biggest submarine. Alexander, no, NT.
No, the biggest submarine actually Russia has is called the Belgorod. And it's only just entered service, and it's a huge thing. And it's got submersibles and all kinds of things of that kind. But no, there's no doubt at all. The US submarine fleet is enormously efficient. It's one of the best parts of the US military.
Stephen Salerno says, aren't they worried about John Woo's national security memos, e.g. couldn't the next president send Biden and half the agencies to Gitmo with no due process other than a presidential terrorism finding?
Well, I have to say this straight away. I thought that John Yu's opinions at the time were disastrously wrong. I still think so. I would be horrified if they were resurrected and misused in the way that you said. But I can't help but think that we're every day in the United States stepping closer to that situation.
Kumar says, anything about the rumored coup in China?
But we discussed that at length in the program. Yeah.
Stephen, thank you for that super chat. Spectre in the air says, you guys are all awesome. How will this play out in Germany this winter with Germans freezing due to no gas? Could we be seeing the next Weimar Republic, and what happened after that?
It's interesting. I mean, look, one of the things that's happening is that we see inflation now in Germany begin to take off in a massive way. I mean, more than anybody could have possibly imagined. And Germany is a country with a historical aversion to inflation. And that, together with fall in living standards, it's very difficult to know how the German population, which has become very accustomed to assuming that Germany is economically prosperous and successful, how they will respond to all of this. They will become angry, but who will they be angry with? With their own government, with the Russians, or with the US? We'll see.
Stephen, thank you for that super chat. Zariel says, I fear that Germany is being pushed back to 1933-45. I can't understand why and how we have become so blind again, but I am really vexed.
I agree. I'm not. I hope it doesn't come to what you described, but I agree. Things are not good in Germany.
Sharon Kidney, too, says, why is everybody so upset about the energy situation? I thought these lunatics were put in office to fight anthropogenic climate change.
Well, you clever man. You're absolutely right, of course. You're completely right. I mean, the fact that we're all going to freeze and go hungry is all to save the planet, no doubt. And we should welcome this. I'm going to say something, actually, putting all the, humour aside. I think this is going to eventually, these policies are going to discredit green thinking amongst a large part of the European population. Unfortunately, there will still be some people who are so obsessed with this that they will cling on to this. But as people get cold And as they become hungry, there's going to be a backlash against green thinking.
Greg UW says, Robert, thoughts on Polyev in Canada winning the PM and enable FF production, coal, natural gas, oil sands, uranium to boost NA economy and ship to EU.
I hope he does win the election. I don't know what Robert will think about this. I mean, I don't know this person very well. I know there's some people who are very skeptical about him. All I will say is he said some interesting things, and he can't possibly be worse than Trudeau. I mean, it would be beyond any human being to be a worse prime minister for Canada than Trudeau is. At least that's my own feeling about this.
Danila says, one thing I cannot understand is why the Germans have allowed and are allowing the U.S. to disastrously screw them over as much as they have.
So many people answering this question. As I said, I mean, I come back to what I said. It's a very conformist society. Its political class is provincial and not very, a bit naive in many of the ways of the world, if one has to be honest about this. There's a very strong Atlanticist element in German society, very embedded in German institutions. If you know Germany, it's not surprising. There's also a very great deal of goodwill still left from the period of, the Cold War, and, the build-up of Germany that followed. So, there's all of these factors at play. Now, that may change.
Sharoniki too says anthropogenic climate change is one of the biggest hoaxes in history.
Okay. And more people are going to be saying that, I suspect, after this winter.
Raymond Conway says, so Brandon bombs Russia infrastructure. To me, that's a direct confrontation, a declaration of war with Russia.
Or once upon a time, it would have been treated as an act of war and might very well have resulted in a war. Nowadays, I think the Russians will keep their powder dry, but they will be looking for a response. But I think also there will be people advising the Kremlin. Revenge is a dish to be eaten cold, and it's getting very cold in Europe.
Nina says, despite it all, the USD remains strong versus the euro and the pound. Why?
Absolutely, of course it does. I mean, I'm not going to discuss Britain and the follies we've gone into, but I mean, in my opinion, the euro is a currency that should never have been created in the first place. The dollar is the currency of a very powerful sovereign state. It's got a proper treasury department behind it. It's got a nation behind it which uses it. The euro, what does it have?
John Fred says, Alex and Alexander, thank you for your efforts. Rhodesian Dream says, the world felt safer during the time of the Soviet Union than it does under the current regime in Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely true.
The Green Moon says, hope that the sovereign states of the EU finally realize that their loyalty lays with the populations who elected them.
No, not this political class, not ever. I mean, the only way that will change is if they're all thrown out, which they may be.
Let's see. T-Bone 316 says, thanks to the moderators, thankless job, and the community really appreciates it. Thankless job, and the community really appreciates it. Thank you for that. Rhodesian Dream says, the U.S. government has also been abusing and miserating its own citizens for years now. And miserating its own citizens for years now.
Things are not as advanced in the US as they are in Europe, but they're heading in the same direction.
Dr. Bill says, I'm an American psychologist in my 80s. I have 53 years of clinical experience, and I agree with Alexander that old Joe is the most dangerous president we have ever seen. He's not just psychopathic, he's demented.
Yes.
And his whole administration is as demented as old Joe.
And it's very good to hear from you again, Dr. Bill, and thank you for joining us on this program, and I agree with you completely.
Spectre in the Air says, Sweden, Italy, going nationalist, right? Dark and cold people look for someone to blame. Globalists are tone deaf, and most U.S. citizens would be against blowing up a pipeline. Also, this will speed up de-dollarization.
Ultimately, I agree with all of that, but we'll have to get through some very choppy waters before that happens. But I agree with you. I think ultimately people will look to their nations, their states, and de-dollarization will accelerate, and the American people would not agree with what their government is doing if they knew about it. But we have to get through this information vice that exists in order for people to be able to see what's really happening.
Warwagon 1985 says, "Hi fellas, do you think any of these current Western leaders have ever read The Guns of August?"
I suspect some of them have done, actually. But, you're quite right. Overall, they're not a very educated group of people.
Warwagon 1985 says, "The Ghost of Kiev did it. Swam all the way from Snake Island." Very good. Pierogi Warfare says, I see on day one many people like Tucker Carlson connect the dots on day one.
Yeah.
What are the chances that many other Americans will wake up from their CNN, MSNBC, and New York Times slumber?
I think the chances. I myself believe that the chances are high, and there's the important point, because the information space in the United States, for all the problems there, remains much wider than in Europe.
Zayo says, "Great job, guys. Watching you every day." Yeah, in New York City. Thank you for that. Let's see. Ertigas says, "The sabotage event, in the way it was handled by mainstream media, opened a space for speculation, fueling the idea that the sabotage was a legit U.S. act of war. The next step for escalation may include a self-inflicted disaster in the Western world put in place to seem like Putin's retaliation."
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I hope we don't get to those kind of extreme actions. At the moment, the mood, the plan seems to be to downplay this whole thing as much as possible.
Bitcoin Crypto says, "What's up?" Euro Gabor says, "Given the deep fondness of the U.S. State Department towards Erdogan, Vucic, and Orban, what is the pipeline for Turkstream? Sabotaged by the Beastie Boys?"
Well, I would have thought that
they are talking about Turkstream, actually.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think Putin and Erdogan will have talked about Turkstream and its vulnerabilities quite a lot over the course of that call. I noticed that energy cooperation between Turkey and Russia was a large part of that readout.
Yeah. B Frakes 1 says, "Way better optics than poor old Mussolini."
Yeah.
Or Maloney.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did think there's any comparison between Mussolini and Maloney, actually.
Henry Peltola says, "You can sense by the way the media and politicians talk about this, everybody knows who actually did this, and they are confused."
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. You've got it exactly correct.
Chris Lothian, thank you for that super chat. Reza says, "What are your thoughts on the possibility of Germany's industrial giants relocating?"
I think it's a high possibility. I mean, they could... and the obvious place they will go is North America, the United States and Canada, where at least there's plenty of energy, and where it's cheaper, by the way, than it is in Germany itself. But of course, if they do that, then they lose some of that social infrastructure that exists in Germany and which is partly responsible for making German companies as efficient as they are.
Stanley Park, thank you for that super sticker. Summer of 1970 says, "Another great show. Thanks." Fragile says, "Serbs eating popcorn right now and watch the show of big powers. At least once in the history, we did not cause one of the world wars."
True enough. Oh, you didn't cause even the First World War, you know. I mean, it's just, what happened in Sarajevo was used by great powers, and Europe was already heading, in my opinion, towards a crash long before the events of Sarajevo.
Karen Rennie, thank you for that super chat. Olga says, H. Wells, The Open Conspiracy, 1928, can explain a bit. It reads as Bible for neoliberal globalism. These people are fanatical. They'll stop at nothing.
Gosh.
Commando Crossfire says it's only a matter of time before someone clever and ambitious figures out that the tools of dictatorship have been ready-made by well-meaning governments all over the world.
Yeah. But the governments have been so
Spoons,
well-meaning.
thank you for that super sticker. Yeah. The Spoons, thank you for that super sticker. Alex Glantz, thank you for that super sticker. Not Intimidated says, as a U.S. citizen, it's not that the Biden administration doesn't understand the consequences of their actions. It's that they know and don't care.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They don't care.
Mojave says, if the deep state is willing to blow up a pipeline of an ally like Germany, won't they stop at nothing to steal American elections?
Yeah. I mean, I think this comes back to what Robert was saying, that, that all the restraints have been thrown off. We have an administration with no moral centre.
Yeah. Tishem says, is the U.S. projection of the use of nukes because it will unleash them, given Pompeo this June saying, no matter the consequences, to maintain control of global resources?
Well, I hope that there are restraints that prevent that happening. But I come back to what I just said. I think there is a great deal of projection. And I think the US could be prepared to use nukes in some situations. I mean, they have considered using nukes in the past. They did in 1968, for example, during the Battle of Khe Sanh in Vietnam, as we now know.
Tatiana, thank you for that super sticker. Etienne says, got here late. I had a Hungarian language lesson.
Oh, wow.
I love when Barnes is on.
Thanks.
Sharon Kidney too says, thank you, Robert, for pointing out the problem with source accuracy in the Western media. How can one know the truth when everybody is lying?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Joanna, thank you for that super sticker. Ankit, thank you for that super sticker. Mahuya says, hey, AAB, what do you think of the possibility of either with RVU, EU energy crisis, and the new Nord Stream boom cause a bigger conflict in the European Union? My thought is that they might start pointing at Germany.
Indeed, it could very well start quarrelling and arguments and recriminations within the European Union. And of course, if we have a financial collapse in the European Union, which involves the euro, then it's entirely possible the whole structure could start to break down. But we'll have to see. We are in that very strange and rather dangerous situation where nobody knows where this is going and how bad it's going to be. But it's getting worse every day.
Darren Levy says, do you think that the UK establishment is trying to make Starmer look as if him becoming prime minister is inevitable? I can't see how him becoming PM will make anything better.
It won't make anything better at all. But I'm going to say something. If you want me to tell you whom the deep state wants to see prime minister, it wants Starmer to be prime minister. He's the person that they will be working for. They don't particularly want Truss, because I think they consider her, frankly, unreliable and incompetent. They didn't trust Johnson either, because, well, we know his history. So they're now working as hard as they can to make Starmer prime minister. That's my view.
Irish Partisan says, Maloney is a sheep herder for the right, as Bernie is for the left. Don't put your faith.
I know a lot of people believe, by the way, good to see you on our programme, Irish Partisan. But can I just say, I know a lot of people think that way. I will maintain my general position. I won't expect betrayal before it happens. She said some things. Let's see what she can do.
Ankit, thank you for that super sticker. Don, thank you for that super chat. Robin, thank you for that super chat. Kadeh, thank you for that super sticker. Copperwolf 87 says, is it not so that the president alone is the executive branch?
Yeah, I think Robert explained it in the previous program, that he's the only elected person in the entire executive branch, so that the entire executive branch takes its power from him, which is something that nobody seems to understand any longer outside, well, at least in the executive branch themselves, that they all work for the president. That's the theory of it.
Roderick says Republicans will only win if they count the votes.
Yeah, well, this is to me, by the way, I know a lot of people are talking about the election being postponed. I don't think there's any risk of that. It's how the votes are counted. That's the one thing that I am generally worried about.
Let's see here. Chris, thank you for that super chat. Mobius says, and yet in East Asia, all is quiet and stable.
Yeah, I know. That's the difference. They're stable. They're busy getting on with their lives. We are not.
Sparky says, great work. Elena Diaz says, is any chance that Russia can be stripped from its seat at the UN Security Council?
None. It is impossible. You would have to change the United Nations to do it. Whilst the United Nations remains the United Nations, Russia has its seat on the Security Council. It can't be done.
Budweiser, thank you for that super sticker. Sparky says both Lula and Bolsonaro are on Russia's side, but Lula might be easier to bribe by the US to flip.
I agree. I completely agree with that, by the way. Yeah. He also has lots of contacts with Lula also has a lot of contacts with the Democratic left in the United States. So I call it left in inverted commas. We all know whom I'm talking about. So I don't have any particular faith in Lula. I want to make that absolutely clear.
Neurosurgery Highland says how the Norway-Poland pipeline impacts the deficit of LNG.
I don't think it impacts it at all. This is the deficit on LNG is huge, and blowing up pipelines isn't going to make. Pipelines that aren't working. LNG is not going to fill the gap. Creating Baltic pipelines with tiny amounts isn't going to work. The fact of the matter is, in Europe, we're screwed. Let's say it straightforwardly. When it comes to gas, we've done this disaster to ourselves. I mean, the blowing up of the pipelines was the icing on the cake, if you like. But we've done this to ourselves. We're screwed. And we all know it, actually. Deep down, all those leaders know it.
Reckless Abandon says, was Robert on Trump's team when they heard TT meeting set up with Veselnitskaya and Glenn Simpson? Bill Browder lied to hide his role.
I don't know. We must ask Robert. I don't know. I'd be very interested to know, actually.
Yeah. And finally, We Are One says, Kiev, go back to Russia, shelled them, never used liberation, only taking land. Also Kiev, referendum is staged. The people in Donbass love us. International observers must be punished. What?
I don't know. Well, I agree with. You make lots of points, but I basically am in agreement with all of them. Whether Kiev will ever go back to Russia, of course, is another question. Probably not, but who knows? Wow.
All right, that is everything. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.